everyone. Hello everyone. My name is Simon and I'm a CEO at Hashit. Hashit is a crypto venture capital based in Seoul and San Francisco, and we have been investing in blockchain space globally since 2016. I'm very happy to moderating today's event because I'm here with two exciting projects, Terra and SKALE. We are an early supporter for these two, and we look forward to seeing more promising developments in their project and community building. So let's begin. Jack and Do, could you please share your vision and recent updates to our audience in about 2 minutes each?
Definitely. So I guess I'll go first here. Nice to see everybody. Thank you for being here today. As Simon said, this is part of the SKALE Mainnet launch series, which really is a launch series focused on crypto and blockchain in general. And that's where we try to get opinion leaders and thought leaders from various projects and investors and early supporters of networks here to give their opinions and views on where crypto is going. So I'm really excited today to be here. And for those of you who don't know SKALE, I can give you a little background. SKALE is a decentralized blockchain network. We like to call it an elastic blockchain network. And what it does is it gives every developer or application their own blockchain. And it does this through a pooled security model. So all of the nodes work together in one group and share Byzantine fault-tolerant security. And then what happens is nodes are randomly selected to work for a decentralized application. So this is built in the Ethereum mainnet, and it also runs on SKALE nodes outside of Ethereum. And so if a developer builds something for Ethereum, in less than 2 minutes, they can get up and running and deploy to a SKALE chain. And then it takes a little bit more extensive work to make sure messaging of assets can be traded back and forth seamlessly. But the goal is to create a very easy to use elastic blockchain or elastic sidechain, or some people are even calling these side shards because it's another take on sharding. And really we're trying to make it so Ethereum can scale and we can have decentralized applications running at lower costs, higher speeds with much easier user experience. One more thing before I stop here and hand it over to Do. I just want to make sure everyone knows that if you go to the bottom right portion of the screen, there's an interpretation button, and you can switch to Korean language, okay? So yeah, choose your preference of whatever language you prefer, and we have a really great team here that's doing the simultaneous interpretation today. Okay, all right, thanks. All right, Do, go for it.
Hi everyone, my name is Do, and I'm a founder and CEO at the Terra project. So Terra works on lots of different things, but we mainly construct a set of stablecoins that are pegged to different world currencies. So today we support a stablecoin that's pegged to the Korean won, the USD, the MFSDR, and the Mongolian MNT. So perhaps what we're best known for is using these stablecoins in a payments context. So think about ways in which we can derive more efficiencies by having users pay in stablecoin and merchants settle in stablecoin. So today we run about 3 different payment networks across Korea and Mongolia using our KRT and MNT stablecoins. So in Korea, we launched Chai, which is an e-wallet about 15 months ago. It is running across 35 of the nation's biggest retailers and is processing about $1 billion in annualized transaction volume across 1.8 million active users. In Mongolia, we launched Mimi Chat, which has a payment wallet called MimiPay embedded within it, that's servicing about 30 to 40,000 monthly active users. And given that Mongolia has about 2.8 million people with mobile devices, this is roughly equivalent to about a little bit north of 1% of the mobile active population in the country. Recently, we've started to work on things outside of payments, such as Anchor, which is an interchain DeFi savings rate protocol, where we package block rewards or staking yields from different POS chains into stable, attractive passive income interest rates for everyday users. So we sort of think about this as a evolved version of DeFi. So you're going to see lots of asset management, passive income opportunities coming from the Terra project in the next few months. Okay, yeah, that's it for me. Looking forward to discussing.
Thank you both for the quick summary. Now I'm going to ask you a series of questions. So let's get started. DeFi is getting a lot of momentum right now. What does today's current rapid growth of DeFi ecosystem mean to Terra and SKALE? This time, go first.
Yeah, so I think for people that are already pretty invested into the crypto ecosystem, DeFi right now is at a really interesting time, because you have lots of these protocols that are being created out of thin air, governance governance tokens, yield farming. So there's a lot of opportunities for profit out there. But if you're trying to onboard new users to join crypto, which is essentially why we're all in this game, is the sort of the barrier to entry in both education and the technical knowledge that's required to begin experimenting with crypto and DeFi, it's getting higher and higher. And I think that's attributable to a lot of different things. So ranging from Ethereum scaling issues to more complicated user interfaces to barriers in education. But I think really coming up with very basic primitives that are very easy to understand, so to which you can draw analogies or parallels in traditional finance, such as a savings account, where you just deposit some money in and then forget about how it works, and then it offers you a better rate than what you can get from a commercial bank. Or like a simple investment product where you can buy price exposure to different types of assets in a really simple kind of way without having to understand concepts of gas or having to wait 5 minutes before the transaction is clear. I think that's the holy grail that we should aspire to. And I think in terms of scaling, Jack would have more to say on the subject.
What's your opinion, Zach?
Yeah, so I get incredibly excited about the growth I'm seeing in DeFi. When it comes to partnerships and integrations in the SKALE network, there are over 50 decentralized applications right now building in the SKALE Innovator program. So these are Ethereum projects, companies, networks, products that are building, and a third of them are in DeFi, broadly categorized as DeFi. So it's a very clear, very strong fit for the SKALE network. And what it comes down to it is DeFi. I think one of the beauties of DeFi is that we have these webs of smart contracts that displace middlemen on multiple areas of centralized finance. And so with automated market making and trading and such, these different functionalities are all reliant on smart contracts. So SKALE is very focused on executing sub-second smart contracts at no cost. So a developer would buy a chain and pay a subsidized cost for a year or 2 years, and then they can just use, they don't have to pay per transaction. Now, and then they need to connect back to the Ethereum mainnet, and there are different ways for them to do that, so that when the end user wants to leave the chain, they can leave and go back into the Ethereum ecosystem, and then a gas fee would be paid. And so it'll be really interesting to see how developers, not only, there's some clear use cases like, lots of transactions, move that into a SKALE chain, minimize costs, but as we look at these money Legos that are coming together in the DeFi world, it'll be interesting to see the way developers use and leverage SKALE chains and the different types of chains. So you could have a very small chain in SKALE, and as a developer, you might buy a lot of small chains and have them do different functions. Or you have a large chain that can give you much more throughput and much more storage, and it serves different use cases. So when you build something and your community is behind an open source project, you have a very clear initial idea of how it will be used. But then you start learning and you start getting pushed as more and more people start interacting with the software. So I'm also excited to see what people come up with over time, and even how SKALE, the token itself, is used and boiled into this DeFi framework and world that I think is really just at the beginning. But the main thing is we've got to lower cost. We've got to make transactions move faster. And and we're excited about that. I also want to say, this is maybe like really out there, like in terms of it's not on our roadmap or yours in the first few months. But another cool thing about Scale is that the Ethereum developer ecosystem is really booming. And with the right sort of connection into another stable currency that isn't even built within the ETH framework, it essentially can be frozen and cloned over or stuck and wrapped and brought over into a Scale chain and used by developers in the Ethereum ecosystem. And I think one of the cool things about Terra and Luna is it's one of the most actually utilized blockchains. And there's a lot of ghost chains out there, so it's nice to see the usage. And I could just see, I'm excited in the future too about how people start not just using one blockchain, but they start leveraging different markets and currencies in different areas and be able to pull them into different developer environments and grow market share. So excited too. Someday we'll have to get into that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's actually something that we can do relatively quickly. So one of the things that we're pushing at Terra is to have our stablecoins live on multiple chains. So we announced something with Solana, earlier this year about constructing, Terra stablecoins on Solana. And what be kind of great about all of these different stablecoins living together is, number one, as you said, it gives exposure to developer ecosystems on different communities. But number two, all of these different stablecoins are going to have first-class citizen rights in all of our different fintech and payments assets. So for example, like people would be able to top up into our payment companies using, Terra stablecoins that live on top of Scale. And then that would be the same as topping up for a stablecoin that's on top of Terra. So we'll probably have to side channel on this, but let's get it going.
Yeah, very cool. No, I like it. That's exciting. It just very clear, immediate use cases pop up. So awesome.
I have a question. As a founder building not on Ethereum's ecosystem, how do you view Ethereum dominance in DeFi today? Are you building any bridge for collaboration, or are you building a whole new ecosystem as Ethereum's competitor?
Yeah, so we're working with Ren Protocol on building a wrapped version of Luna and Terra stablecoins to be bridged into Ethereum. And then I think like there's immediate applications of this that are really interesting. So we'd be creating, pools on Banker, for instance, and then there could be like Uniswap applications that could immediately pop up. In terms of sort of competing with Ethereum, that's something that I get asked a lot. But I think the really important thing is to try to get developers that are outside of crypto to join in, rather than fighting for the developer mindshare in this closed circle. Because like there's maybe like 50,000 developers on Ethereum, but if you look at JavaScript, there's probably millions, right? So I think everybody wants to get to a state where the total number of crypto developers are in the millions. And I don't think we are talking about a situation where, one platform takes over all 50. So, happy to see Ethereum thrive. I have some Ether myself, but I think the Holy Grail is something that's way more attractive.
Yeah, sounds great. Jack, I want to go back to you since you mentioned transaction fees. Right now, each transaction volume is reaching its maximum capacity, which explains the high gas fees. This is precisely why so many layer 2 projects are getting involved. Jack, could you explain how you look at the layer 2 landscape and what makes Scale unique?
So layer 2 is critical for the success of Ethereum. And I think, to piggyback on one of Do's comments there is, I think a lot of what's not understood by people is just the TAM, the total addressable market. And Ethereum is, Scale's fully a part of the Ethereum ecosystem. It fully supports Ethereum. And we see that ecosystem growing, but the total addressable market's just small compared to traditional finance or traditional gaming or enterprise software or different consumer applications and so on and so forth, and payment platforms and currencies. So we're just like at the very, very tip of the iceberg. So I think there's going to be a ton of room for growth across the world, and and we'll see certain chains have different strengths with different use cases and different geographies too. just like we have in other types of businesses. So layer 2, again, is very, very important. And the way SKALE is unique is I'd say there's a design decision that we bet on and has come through that I think we made a really good decision. So one of the prior layer 2 design decisions that a lot of the research was based around was trying to create a dynamic on the layer 2 where you would use software, like enterprise software, different tools that would require a central operator to run software on a node that then acted as the protector that could make it so that the mainnet would always be responsible for determining whose tokens go where, okay? And so what you basically have done is and layer 2 used to just mean, oh yeah, throw a second blockchain up on a first blockchain and have the second one have a lot less operators. And then it turned into this design decision, well, let's make a no cust or zero custody dynamic on layer 2, where, really in order to do that, I think like kind of the lesser known detail here is that you're essentially implementing software to do that work that's run by an individual, an entity, a company, whatever. Now SKALE took a different route, and we said, hey, we believe in blockchain. We believe there are some really, really great values of side chains, but there's also some really, really poor things about side chains about security. And so one of the poor things about traditional side chains is they have a fixed set of validators and nodes that run that are usually very small. And so collusion and bribery attacks, it's just, you lose a lot of your defense and game theory elements that protect traditional blockchains when you have just a very small set of people that are acting in a blockchain. And so the decision SKALE made was, hey, the value you get for a sidechain is that there's no complexity. You can just connect the things immediately. They talk back and forth really quickly. You don't have these data availability issues. You can create a phenomenal user experience by connecting into wallets through Web3.js, just basically being directly connected to the end user without timeouts and all these other kind of UX issues that we see in the kind of enterprise software version of layer 2. And so, and with a central operator. So SKALE is built and designed to have a large set of nodes, and then through random selection, randomly define which nodes operate in the chain and then rotate them. And so you get this really big pool, but whoever runs your chain, it's going to be different. Each month it will look different, and each month it's the initial set is pulled from a very large pool. And so and then there's also a stake. And so if you act maliciously, you lose a lot of money if you're running a node. And so this randomness, rotation, and incentives allows for not the same security issues you would have with traditional side chains, but it gives you a lot of the advantages you would get with traditional side chains. But on top of that, SKALE has some other, I think really nice things around consensus and BLS threshold signatures that allow for optimized performance. But that was a big piece of it. And a big part of that bet was, will there be a validator ecosystem? And I think in 2016, 2017, no one knew that. It was just seemed like, well, miners, like what are the mining pools doing, right? And now there's this mature, robust, evolving validator ecosystem, and that really makes running BFT, Byzantine fault tolerant blockchains, a secure practice. And so it opens up things like SKALE and what we see with other networks that are popping up that frankly aren't having major security issues. I haven't seen anyone steal a bunch of money from Cosmos yet, and that's a proof of stake BFT blockchain. So I think the world's changing, and this design choice we feel is really good because at the end of the day, we give developers what they need, how they need it, and at the price they want it for themselves and their users. That's what the SKALE Network tries to do.
Yeah, I think that was very helpful for our audience. Thank you for your explanation. Jack, as you said, the world is changing, but overall, both of you mentioned that more adoption is critical in the crypto space. What do you think is missing in DeFi today to reach the next level of mass adoption? And what are you doing to achieve this goal? Jack, can you get us started?
Yes, yes. So when I think about one, DeFi is it's just still crawling, and I like to use the crawl, walk, run analogy. There's some amazing things happening though, and we're seeing this money Lego world come together where we can have full liquidity and pooling of risk and assurance around risk and automated market making. It's really impressive to see what's happening, but I think we're still in the early stages of use cases. A lot of these use cases are around crypto on crypto loans, and I think it'll be really interesting where we start seeing other world loans come in, and maybe not mortgages for a long time because of the nature and the importance and the length of a lot of those loans, but there are other shorter term loans that aren't just about gamification and trading of crypto assets to crypto assets. And I think when we get there, we're going to get to the next tier. But what we're building now are requirements to help all these other components come together. And I actually think DeFi will support the Web3 movement when Web3 really starts rocking later, because you have this liquidity backend that smart contract run as opposed to being only done through central gateways. So I'm excited about it. Excited to see what will come over the next 6 months, 12 months. It'll be interesting.
Sounds great. So what are you doing to reach the next level of mass adoption?
Yeah, so I think in terms of DeFi, if you look at the everyday user, what they want, the types of products that they want is pretty simple, right? So they want to be able to earn a passive income that's higher than what they can get from the commercial bank. And right now is a really good opportunity to do that because interest rates for commercial banks have basically tanked. They like the ability to buy price exposure to lots of different assets. So it could be real estate, it could be stocks, it could be commodities. And like all situations considered, they like the ability to be able to borrow capital to be able to do 1 and 2, right? So these are the properties of DeFi that should be supported in the long term. So today, I think the problem is that there's like a lot of interesting things that are happening in DeFi, but there's basically no analogs to the traditional finance space. So, you have this ability to lever up on tokens. You can buy, either spot or levered up price exposure to Bitcoin, Ethereum, and lots of wrap tokens. But there isn't ability to buy exposure to lots of real world assets. And there isn't really a way to borrow money in a way that isn't fully crypto collateralized. And this last piece is also pretty important as well, because like, for example, if I'm a farmer in Malaysia, you're not banking the unbanked by giving this person the ability to borrow money on fully collateralized Bitcoin loans, right? Because he's not going to have Bitcoin anyway. So some sort of like social proof under collateralized crypto based loans is definitely something that's missing in DeFi as well. Of course, there's like a lot of infrastructure questions that needs to be solved before DeFi can mature. But in my mind, I think it's a question of going back to the drawing board and defining financial products that are really simple to understand and are analogous to what users can get in the real world, except with a couple of properties that are different. So better accessibility, better rates, and things like that. And at Terra, that's most of the things that we're focusing on now. Through Anchor, we're trying to create a better interest rates on passive income. We're trying to create a better synthetic price exposure to assets through something called the Mirror Protocol. We're also working on something interesting with under collateralized lending, but it's probably too early to share. Yeah.
I agree with Jack and Do that the blockchain world needs to review its fundamental assumptions. Right now, I see a difference between the real world and the virtual world caused by blockchain. In the real world, I largely see production before finance. But in the blockchain world, I see much more financial activities before basing the real value from production. Historically, for example, a farmer would want to take out a loan to buy more farmland or cows to increase his production. Finance here makes sense only because there is an underlying production. In blockchain, however, we are missing this underlying asset of farmland or cows, but the financial infrastructure is there to leverage itself, which is why we are seeing a lots of ICOs, IEOs, but not enough tangible product. This is a critical point, I think, and we base a lot of our investment to solve this pain point. I think we need more projects to create real value, whether it is through games or entertainment or contents in blockchain ecosystem, so that the financial infrastructure can become more robust. So the next question is, why do you think much more progress has been made in finance instead of creating more blockchain-based service? And when do you think we can start seeing this blockchain gaming or service available to the general public? Jack, if you could answer first.
Okay, great. So, hey, this is a phenomenal question. It's something I've been talking a lot to people about recently. And it's really, I think, what is the onset of Web3? Like, when are we going to see blockchains start making a disruption in either centralized businesses or centralized businesses using blockchains and Web3 to compete with other centralized competitors? So now I'll start though by saying DeFi, I think DeFi got to a point of success because you could finally have a user experience for the captive audience or the market share that was ready to use DeFi that worked for them. Now, if you have to pay $10 to, mint your synthetics assets, you're still going to do it, okay? If you have to pay $10 to move out a loan out of a balancing pool, you're going to do it, okay? It's fine. And if the transaction takes 15 seconds, it's okay. So what happened is we got to the point with Ethereum where we were able to build user experiences that still worked with high latency and really high costs for a market that cared, okay? Now, I think there's still a massive market that cares, and Doe had a good point just around a savings account. And I think, as we start, DeFi grows up and we're gonna have less risky, but still higher returning savings vehicles, because we don't have brick and mortar banks. We don't have people working at these places doing sales and et cetera. Like we're using smart contracts, okay? And so I think we'll keep evolving. But I also think that, again, we need to have a component, an injection of real world value. And if you think about our daily lives, like what do we spend money on, right? And the things we spend money on at some point need to be paid in crypto or be something that's crypto you're buying. And there's a lot of things we all spend money on as opposed to just crypto on crypto, which also has a place and it's exciting. But I really feel like the user experience with latency, block times, having really mature, stable tokens, which now we're seeing really come into fruition here. All of these things are needed in order to get us to a Web3 world where you do have a user experience that meets the audience where they need to be met. Like I need to be able to opt in, with my phone. I don't want to have to do all this crypto stuff that we like doing, but we know our friends and our relatives who don't do crypto don't like doing that stuff. I need to be able to then use products that have reasonable user experiences and ones that I'm used to. And I think as that all comes together and SKALE, that's our goal, is to make sure that user experience and price component can be there to make crypto work. But I think we're gonna have hundreds of millions of users and a lot of use cases, and which makes DeFi even more powerful because they're able to pull in assets that have real world usage of things we actually spend our money on. Normal people spend their money on. So that's my perspective. And I think to be honest, I think we're really close, like within 6 months of seeing a massive outbreak of success of Web3 products.
Thank you. So you have talked about products that the consumer wants, such as saving.
소비자들이 원하는 예금이나 투자 계좌에 대해서 말씀하셨는데,
what other service do you think would drive more adoption for the general public?
더 많이 사람들이 사용할 만한 서비스는 어떤 것들이 있다고 생각하십니까?
Is it just me, or can you hear the Korean translation?
Yeah, I think the Korean translation got injected into this chat. So,
Okay.
Can you hear
well,
me still?
Yeah, I can hear you still. Yeah.
Alanita, we can hear you now. So technical difficulties. Sorry, everybody.
Yeah.
We can keep it going.
So,
We can just do non-simultaneous interpretation. We'll talk,
sure.
translate. How about that?
Simon, can you quickly repeat the question?
Oh yes, so you talked about financial product on top of Terra. So what other service do you think would drive more adoption for the general public outside of financial sector or financial product?
Yeah, so I'm interested in sort of a couple of different things, and I think, you know, thematically they sort of coalesce outside of finance. They coalesce around two different things. So number one, I think blockchains are really good when you're trying to solve large-scale coordination problems. So for example, if you're trying to put together like a massive donation, for instance, then I think you can solve social problems by using blockchain technology to do that rather than centralized services. When you are, you know, trying to put together like an election, I think right now blockchains aren't mature enough to, let's say, handle like a national presidential election, for instance, because network security isn't expensive enough to secure, let's say, the U.S. presidential elections, for instance. But I think it can be used for things like, you know, sort of a unbiased census of what people are feeling about the different issues that are going on within a country. So this could be like an unpoliticized, unadulterated, you know, election of people's sentiment on lots of different issues. And you can even have like pricing schemes that are built on top of this. On the other end of the spectrum, I'm pretty interested in like games. So I think one of the things that, you know, in South Korea, the gaming industry did really well is that a lot of the novel, you know, concepts and technology and gamifications that we used in, let's say, e-commerce and payments today was actually first developed in, you know, the leading games of the country. So things like MapleStory, 바람의 나라, you know, and you know, different massive multiplayer online games like that. So I think sort of games with large user bases, interesting incentive systems, so, you know, persistent wealth being generated, such as like NFTs, is a really interesting industry to look forward to as blockchain scale over the next 3 years.
Yeah.
And Simon, before we go to the next question, I want to add to that too. Like one of the things I always think about is, and then you brought this up with the election scenario, and there's things that we're just not ready for yet because there is a cost to trusting a blockchain. Okay, and it's like, and so right now there's the cost of just trusting one operator. Like we'll say, hey, we're going to trust the government. They're going to keep track of this stuff, and people are okay with that. The costs of trusting the blockchain are that blockchains work in a, you know, with game theory, and will 2/3 of these operators not be bad, right? Will in a proof of work, are we sure that never greater than 51% will be bad, right? And so there's some things though where, you know, that just isn't even an issue, and it adds value. And those are the areas where it's just an immediate value, where you can have large scale coordination with complexity that like Joe was talking about, where you're ready to just participate in gaming. Yeah, gaming's a sweet spot. I think gaming's going to be, there's a lot of cool stuff being worked on right now. And I think we're going to see a gaming boom over the next 6 months.
Yeah, I'm very excited about the gaming with DAO-backed kinds of new economy in the blockchain space.
Yeah.
So yeah, to the next question. We believe custody and wallet solutions are the key to mass adoption in Korea and Asia. What step is each project taking to capture this opportunity? Jack, perhaps you can get us started with your APK or SDK solutions.
Yeah, so another, I think, big bet we made when we were thinking like, hey, what's going to happen in terms of the market? I think there's amazing stuff popping up all over the world, but we were thinking, will the Ethereum developer ecosystem boom from a tooling perspective? And today we announced 40 integration partners and partners of different categories. And really, it's incredibly easy for Scale to integrate everywhere because of the Ethereum compatibility. So the Scale tokens, ERC-77 token, and that's because the mainnet is, or the Ethereum mainnet is where it's almost like a brain. It's called the Scale Manager, and what it does is it determines through a lot of cryptography in conjunction with the nodes in the network of what nodes go where, who works on which dApp, and it does orchestration, administration, and payments. It also pays validator operators. People that stake, it gets staked in the Ethereum mainnet. If you buy a chain or rent a chain, you pay and scale into the Ethereum mainnet. So Ethereum's the back end. And so it's just really easy for us. You just instant interoperability with anything Ethereum because EVM lives on each chain, and everything in Scale is ERC-20 backwards compatible through the ERC-777. So we had a lot easier than other people that had to design and build a lot of their own tooling, wallets, and networking ecosystem. And Summit, I think you've seen Terra do it phenomenally well. I'd love to hear their secrets because they have one of the most used blockchains in the world, from my understanding. So I'd like to hear what they did. But we thankfully didn't have to do much.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Tell us about the synergy between Terra and Chai and some of the other opportunities or partnership with the other wallets or custody these days.
Yeah, so before we talk about Terra and Chai, what's really interesting is that we're reliving a lot of the evolution that fintech mobile wallets lived through in the early to mid 2000s. Today in blockchain. So I remember when I first went to college in 2010, there were lots of different, fintech wallets that were raising money in Silicon Valley. And then they were mainly competing on the vectors of user experience. So there wasn't sort of any unique features behind each of these wallets, but like basically you had lots of different wallets that were competing on how pretty their buttons were or how friendly their tutorials. And you had named VCs like go up in front of the press and talk about how user-friendly these different wallets are. But then today, like fintech, user experience in fintech is mostly played out, if you will. So if you look at the user experience that Square Cash App offers versus, let's say, Venmo or PayPal, Alipay, WeChat Pay, I think they're all pretty competitive. They do have differences, but I don't think you would pick one wallet over another, depending on how strong their user interface or design qualities are. A lot of the differentiation in fintech happens around commercial terms. So for example, how many merchants does this thing hook up to? What sorts of features does this wallet have? Like, does it offer me more benefits? Does it offer me more kickbacks or promotions? And then the same thing happened in the credit card industry as well. So when Visa and MasterCard first rolled out, the main question was around how many different wallets or how many different merchants would accept my card. And sort of that's where American Express lost the battle. But then, today it's accepted that merchant acceptance is ubiquitous. And then all of these different credit cards are competing on commercial vectors. Like how much benefits can this card offer me? Like how many airline miles, how much discounts to Starbucks. So basically the narrative changes from very simple user experience-based concerns to something that's a little bit more sophisticated. So like multi-year or decade-long retention patterns or schemes that these companies can offer to their customers. And I see similar patterns play out in crypto wallets and custody providers. So in crypto wallets, like most of the benefits that top wallets offer their communities is support for the assets that they want, which is mainly a coverage question. And then secondly, there are starting to be some promotions, especially on the exchanges. So for doing user promotions around token airdrops, if you will. So a lot of the wallets are starting to are still mainly competing on user experience and user interfaces, but they're starting to compete on some of the commercial interfaces. Going forward for the next 3 years, a pattern that I see is the dialogue will shift more and more towards competing on commercial vectors of what these wallets can do with different assets, but these benefits will start to become repackaged, right? So instead of just doing token airdrops, these wallet providers might try to negotiate with service providers like Netflix or Starbucks to get preferred pricing for payments for payments that are made through their respective wallets. So you're going to see repackaged commercial benefits, and that's sort of what we do at Chai through the Terra network as well, right? So now that we are starting to have lots and lots of different scale, like in the beginning, we used to pay for most of the user kickbacks and promotions and benefits, but we're transitioning to a model where now that we have the user base, we're using some of the cash flows that are happening within the network and the system to offer merchants a way to compete for revenue lift by offering users promotions. So that's sort of the main growth drivers for Chai and Terra at the moment, where merchants offer promotions to different users. Users come into the application to check out different types of promotions. And then based on that, that creates a virtuous cycle where merchants are providing more and more promotions dollars to the service, and then users are using the service more and more based on those promotions. So quite excited to see how the wallet and custody business is moving going forward.
Hey, Joe, I've got if you don't mind, I've got a question for you. I remember I was trying to sign up for like an E-Trade account or a Scottrade or something back in like 2005. And it was so painful. I had to send in a physical voided check. I had to do all this stuff. And I was just like, I just gave up. I just didn't do it. It was too painful. And then like fast forward, a handful of years later, like Plaid is a thing, right? And Plaid is this back-end connector between every trading interface or wallet and different banking institutions. And immediately, like I was like 3 minutes, I was set up on Robinhood because I think they're using Plaid on the back end. And there's this, and so I'm wondering, is there going to be a like Plaid of crypto where we have either a set of protocols or open standards or companies that are going to make a lot of money by going out and building the rails and the connectors to help all these systems come together? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, absolutely. So I think mostly this is not really a user interface design question, but I think it's mostly a regulatory question. So with all credit to guys at E-Trade, when they were first trying to construct systems like this, they were probably one of the first in the market, which is why when they went to talk to regulators about it, they probably said, this is something that we don't want to deal with, which is probably why they came up with such a convoluted system of having to send voided checks. So when Plaid launched for the first time, actually, I think most interpretations of US law would say that the methodologies that they were using were illegal, but it became possible because Mint first created the methodology of using the headless browser to get the user's ID and password, and then just basically spoofing user's existence through the headless browser mechanism to log into a user's bank account information vicariously, right? So once you start to have lots of different players that are wanting to do the same thing, then I think that's when regulators decide to get clever and then come up with different ways in which a better user experience can be offered. So right now, I think it's a little bit early. I think there's a couple of players that are trying to knock down doors. We're doing some of that in Korea with Hash. I think Coinbase is trying to do that in the US, but I think it's going to take a little bit of time. But once there is a sufficient number of players saying that this is the financial innovation that needs to happen, I think that's when regulations and best practices are going to evolve to accommodate the types of user experiences that we need to exist.
Okay, I have a final question. So two projects here are representing the East and the Western market, I think. And it would be great to hear directly from you to share thoughts on development in the West Silicon Valley adoption and growth in Asia. So, what's your strategy to expand your territory to the West? Yeah,
so Terra is fairly distributed at this point. I think about 20 to 25% of our headcount is working outside of Seoul. We are in the process of setting up an office outside of Asia. It's kind of got stymied because of COVID, but that's going to happen soon. But basically, I think one of the best things about working in blockchain is that by necessity of having to include the community in the discussion, a lot of the business and engineering development has to happen in highly documented and distributed format. So which means that your company is able to go global, maybe not from day one, but very soon from day one. So you are actually able to hire people from, let's say, Belarus or the US, and given sufficient maturity in the types of people that you work with, that doesn't cause any problems in sort of driving the adoption of whatever that you happen to be working on at the moment. In terms of the end products, a lot of the things that we're creating in the second half of 2020 are geared towards markets outside of Asia. So Anchor is going to predominantly, with the exception of Chai, predominantly launch in the US. So that's kind of interesting. But I think, you know, one of the things that's interesting about Korea is that the market's starting to become a lot smaller after 2017. But I think it drove out a lot of speculators, and people that are genuinely interested in the industry are increasing in number. So in terms of the total caliber of discussions, even the quality of the traders, I think it's going up over time. So that's something that we see that's super positive, and we've been working with a lot of talent that's been wanting to get their hands into blockchain for the first time. So at least in the Korean market, I think a lot of the things that are happening are super positive.
Thank you. And now you, Jack, what's your strategy to expand in Asian market?
Yeah, so one thing I think is really interesting about crypto is to be successful, and I think this is true of all the successful crypto networks and projects and communities, the core team and supporting teams, you just have to be really global. So Doe and I used to see each other, and Simon, you and I've seen you guys in how many cities around the world? I don't even know, because we were always on planes going to different hacker events and blockchain events, right? And that's just part of the, you know, the work and the effort is you've got to get up early and get on airplanes and be jet lagged, but you end up covering a lot of the globe, and you can build a lot of advocacy, community, get customers, partners, open source contributors, et cetera. So it is a very global game and a global effort. And you can see from the user perspective, I think if you looked at where tokens are around the world and who's participating, like it's very, very global, obviously. And I think the Asian market is I think a very important strategic market. But when we think about it, we try to think about it as, you know, the developers and where the developers are. And in particular in Korea, I know there's a lot of phenomenal gaming, decentralized finance, and just other entities that are thinking of using crypto or blockchain within their platforms. So that market's really exciting for us, and I think growing. I think, you know, if you look at San Francisco right now, I mean, everyone's working from home, so we've lost a lot of that like coffee shop magic of trading ideas. You go through a coffee shop in San Francisco, you'll hear 4 conversations about whatever the 2, you know, like hot trends are right then. It was machine learning and you know, something else. And now, you know, people are talking about DeFi. DeFi is really where a lot of the action is. And I see a lot of efforts and teams for the last 6 months. You go to Ethereum meetups, developer meetups, everyone's talking about DeFi. And then, you know, 6 months later, the rest of the world knows about it. And in other cities too, people are talking about DeFi. It wasn't just there, obviously, but that was a main theme in San Francisco. But I think, you know, now I'm starting to hear the Web3 crickets are chirping and the momentum's starting to build again. And a big piece of this is that there's so many things launching that from an infrastructure perspective that make using crypto easier, faster, and less expensive. So I think Web3 is going to soon have its day too. But yeah, we're really excited about, you know, having a big presence in Korea. That was one of the reasons, right, Simon, we started working together. It was, you know, I think we were sitting in New York with each other, and you were telling me about how Korea led scale around the world. So I'm really excited to spend more time there over the next year when we can all travel again and we all have our vaccines for COVID. But hopefully that'll be early next year.
I hope so. I think this is all time we have for today. now I would like to open up our seminar to the audience and see if they have any questions.
Okay, the Q&A tab, let's see here. Okay, we've had 4 answered. Okay.
I think they're just translations, actually.
Oh, okay, great. Any questions? Jenny, do you have a question? You always have good questions. And feel free to write questions in Korean also, and they can be translated back.
Jack, would it be worthwhile to go through some of the questions in the Q&A tab? Because yeah, the responses below are just Korean translations of the question.
Oh, great. Yeah, here we go. So we do have some. I think I see one. Is Terra planning on using SKALE, or why is this webinar combined? So, well, let me say one piece first. I think we're really excited, as I mentioned earlier, about possibility of, I don't know, we'll have to talk about this, Stowe, but I don't know if we would use some sort of threshold encryption mechanism to get Luna into SKALE chains, but that's exciting for us. But also, I think when you look at the state of the market's still small, and we like to, I think partnerships and community building can happen in a lot of manners. So we're excited about future integration, but we're doing this together. I think we're both part of the Hash portfolio family, and I think are big fans of each other. So I've always been a big fan of the Terra project since we met a few years ago, over a year ago, almost 2 years ago in Seoul, since when Do and I first met.
Yeah, and I think we didn't really spend too much time talking about it throughout this session, but crypto is highly cyclical, right? So right now DeFi is all the rage, but one of the things that I agreed most with what you said is Web3 is going to be a thing 4 days later, right? And scaling blockchains is going to be a huge thing 5 days later. And then the reason for this is there's a lot of people that are coming into blockchain and DeFi for the first time, and then they're trying to use Curve.finance through MetaMask, and they can't understand the user experience of having to wait for such a long time for which actually to clear. And I think robust layer 2 application specific layers on top of that are sort of co-working with Ethereum is going to be a valuable piece of the puzzle. And at Terra, we are sort of specifically focused on creating stablecoins, and we are interested in working with the best that blockchain has to offer in order to use our stablecoins as a base layer primitive to build and weave lots of different applications. So in that light, we would love to have Terra stablecoins supported on SKALE, and then that's sort of like the collaboration that we are pretty happy to do. But furthermore, I think it's blockchain is so early that it's important to collaborate in as many ways as possible to work together in order to get the best result.
Here is another question about concerning collateral stability. So most of the DeFi stuff are backed by crypto collateral, and the price of crypto is not that steady. So what's your opinion about these kinds of risky situation? So yeah, I mean, so the thing is, with any type of system, there are failure scenarios, right? So even with fiat currencies fail all the time, right? So if you look at even the Hong Kong dollar, for instance, it wasn't so many decades ago where they failed to defend the peg against the US dollar, or the Korean won, which is a relatively one of the major currencies and the second most liquid currency in the Asian FX market.
it's like devalued 2x against the dollar in the 2008, 2009 financial crisis. So these things happen, right? And even with Tether or USDC or Paxos, like unless you can guarantee the integrity of the underlying collateral, there might be smart contract failures. You know, there are lots of different situations in which stability can break, right? And I think different stablecoins like Tether, MakerDAO, Terra take different risk profiles and different failure scenarios depending on where the risks are coming from. But I think with us, I think it's a pretty simple equation of you can almost think about, you know, Terra stablecoins is equivalent to, you know, sort of you know, gift cards or points that are existing in, you know, several different fintech companies in a permissionless kind of manner. So insofar as you have these companies that are thriving and then growing, I think there isn't really a significant risk to depegging. But you know, of course, we always continue to iterate and make the system more robust over time.
By the way, we had one question. I wanted to add a little more detail. Someone said, how would Terra and SKALE work together? I just want to give an example. And this is what, you know, Joe, after we both get through our launches, we'll go work on this. But if there are a lot of developers in the Ethereum ecosystem, and what they're trying to do is they like Ethereum because they have this whole web of tools at their disposal and EVM, and they're just kind of this system that's in place. But you're stuck with just a fixed set of assets that can run in your chain in an interoperable manner. And if there's 1 million people using Terra's stablecoin, then a developer in the Ethereum ecosystem would love to be able to integrate that, or even more, let's say 50 million people eventually using, or 100 million people using the stablecoin. If you could integrate that in a fully interoperable manner with Ethereum virtual machine and the entire Ethereum stack, that's the win. And so that's where a SKALE chain can be the connection point, as opposed to trying to connect just into the mainnet itself with wrapping and cloning into the mainnet. So with, again, all the values you'd get in SKALE, sub-second block times, fast finality, et cetera. So, and you know, customers drive integration. So as we see people, and as we get to this next wave of growth, I think we're going to have a lot of asks for this. And then we'll either build it ourselves, like from the core teams, or even do, let the open source community do contributions and integration work.
I think time's up. So yeah, I want to thank you again for joining our panel session today. And I hope that this session was informative for our audience. I wish you the best of success, and I hope that we can share more exciting news soon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great job, Simon. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.